What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we are going over our first seasonal weapon, first season of the Witch here, with a new fusion rifle that is solar burn called the Eremite. Now this thing is a high impact frame, so it does have a pretty slow charge time, but the way I have it built out for PvE is 100 impact with almost 70 range. So this thing absolutely juices in the damage department, especially with a new perk that we got this season. A couple different fusions have it, but this is our only crafted one. So I'm covering this weapon right here for both PvE and PvP for y'all. Definitely doesn't shine nearly as bright inside a PvE, just because you got rapid fire frames like iterative loop that are definitely the S tier weapon for fusion rifles in the Crucible. But this thing, if you can be cheeky with it and play that charge time right, you can absolutely map Guardians as well. Now, before we get into the god rolls for PvE and PvP, we have Head Rush, a new origin trait as well. Standing up after crouching for a short time grants the weapon bonus period of improved handling and reload speed. So Crucible, you get that handling if you want, and for the PvE realm, that reload speed definitely comes in clutch because it is pretty low at a 24, which you will see in a second here, but it is a very fun perk in my opinion with stuff for DPS, the sniper from this season, this fusion, as well as the rocket semi-optician. So we'll be going over those as well in the future, but let's get into the actual god rolls for these for PvP and PvE. Starting us out right here with the Juicer Magooser for PvE. This thing slaps so hard, especially with our combination of perks in the third and fourth column. For me, I went with range on this for my masterwork. You could go with charge time or reload if you want, but the charge time only takes it down to 920 for those milliseconds, and you don't really feel that 40 milliseconds in my opinion. So I went with the range so we can absolutely map those enemies without getting in too much trouble for them damaging us. Now for our first perk, we got Small Bore, giving us that range and stability since it does take a little bit to fire, and we're going to be standing back a little bit farther if you want with this range. Wanted to add that stability to this weapon as well. Now for me, I went with Liquid Coils here, so we have increased damage, slower charge time, but none of the other barrels or batteries, I should say, actually changes the charge time. You could go with something like Ionized if you want 7 in the magazine, but look at how low it makes the reload speed at 4. So you could, even if you put on the reload here in our masterwork, having that ionized battery makes the reload so slow that it doesn't feel worth it to me. Now in the third and fourth column, we got 2 different rolls that I think work perfectly with this weapon. This right here is my God Roll 5 out of 5, which I crafted for myself in Envious Assassin in our new damage perk, Controlled Burst. So Envious Assassin, getting defeats with other targets before drawing this, transfers ammo from the magazine to the reserves. That is reversed, but this effectively overflows the magazine based on the number of defeats, and since we're using this for its next perk and that damage, it pairs perfectly. So we wipe out all those red bars and even maybe a major with this, so we can overflow the fusion and then do our damage on either those champions, bosses with Controlled Burst. So landing every shot in a burst grants this weapon increased damage and reduced charge time for an improved duration. So that is why I wasn't worried about a charge time on our masterwork as well. This does grant a 20% damage bonus as well, which pairs with stuff like solar surges and that overcharged weapons. So having the overflow of Envious Assassin with controlled burst feels so good for that damage. We can have about 10 shots where the first one you hit all your bolts. That is the base damage of the weapon, and then those next 8 shots ish will all have that 20% damage increase just from controlled bursts. So this thing is very good with damage output in my personal opinion. Now, the other option that you could go with is something like Compulsive Reloader with Reservoir Burst. The reason that this works together is Compulsive Reloader grants increased reload speed when close to a full magazine, so you reload very often after the first couple shots of this magazine. That pairs with Reservoir Burst because when the battery is full, your next burst deals additional damage and causes targets to explode, so this improves the stability a little bit for us as well. But if you're just taking a shot or two and then reloading because of Compulsive Reloader here, and then you can get Reservoir Burst proc more often, but I feel like Reservoir Burst doesn't work nearly as good as our new damage perk in Controlled Burst. It only procs every so often when that magazine is full, so that's why I went with Envious and Controlled Burst for the PvE God Roll. Now, for the PvP realm, like I said, definitely not nearly as good as inside of the PvE realm, but it still is okay, especially with the range. As you can see, being 76, you can absolutely map some Guardians. So we're going to go with range masterwork, obviously, so we can get this thing built out as heavily as we can for range. Going with full board does decrease our handling and stability slightly, but we're not going to be switching on and off of this weapon. We're just going to be holding it out since it takes almost a full second for this thing to charge up, but we're going to be absolutely annihilating Guardians with it. Now, I am going with liquid coils again for that increased impact, having it at 100, like I said, at a crazy range of 76, and that 100 impact, it is mapping Guardians. Now for me, I am going with Slick Draw on this, so increases its handling a lot, but decreases target acquisition. So since that handling is so low, it felt like the right play. Nothing else in the perks here really apply to PvP. You could go something like Pulse Monitor if you want, so it automatically reloads and gives handling when lightly wounded, but that's basically what Slick Draw is doing anyways, so that's why we threw it on. Now for the fourth column, again, nothing really is that great for the PvP realm. You could go something like Elemental Capacitor, depending on what you're using, so you could use like Arc for that handling, but I personally went with Cornered, so you got a little bit faster charge time on this when surrounded by combatants, so when you're in deep in that zones, whatever you are, you can get maybe a couple shots off instead of only one because of that slow charge time, and you're mapping people with this anyways, so that corner does get procced with a little bit bigger distance because of this weapon. It feels like it inside of PvP, so Slick Draw with this and that juicy range just feels right, and nothing else really piqued my interest for the PvP realm. So overall with this weapon inside of the Crucible, giving it maybe a 2.5 for the Crucible, just because there's so many better options, and high impacts definitely don't shine bright inside of the Crucible. But for the PvE realm, I personally giving this thing a nice juicy 4.8 out of 5, just because I think that new Controlled Burst is absolutely nasty. Shout out to Cameron for giving me that idea. Like I said, there's a couple other fusions that can have it on it, but one of them is Strand inside of our kinetic slot, but this is crafted so we can get that enhanced version, and that 20% damage output feels so good inside of the PvE realm, especially with Envious Assassin, so you can have like 7-8 shots of the Controlled Burst procced instead of only 3 or 4. So it feels like a nice new version for a heavy hitting fusion, just because we have those rapid fire frames with Vorpal that seem to be taking the cake for DPS. But I think this thing is going to emerge as one of the best fusion rifles for that endgame PvE. But that's just my opinion, so y'all have to let me know what you guys think of this thing. I think it absolutely slaps. So appreciate all y'all for sticking around. A little bit longer video for a weapon guide here, but y'all have been crushing it on the channel, joining the Discord, everything like that has been absolutely gnarly. So make sure to hit that up in the description as well. Notifications, join subwise on the channel here so you don't miss out on any of the builds or these weapon guides for y'all streaming every so often on the tube as well. So make sure to be on the lookout for those. So appreciate all you guys. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.